Hello and welcome to an unofficial episode of Topcoder Team Live. I'm your community manager, Nick Castillo, and it is Algorithm Week. Joining me today is Tim Kirchner. You might recognize him. He runs a lot of the algorithm matches, the SRM matches, the marathon matches, pretty much all of our data science track, and at the TCOs. And he's joining me today. So thank you, Tim, for coming on.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here.
And I just wanted to point out you're wearing a very nice Topcoder t-shirt. Does it have a history? I know that you have a lot of Topcoder
t-shirts. Yeah, you can actually kind of see it there. I do, in fact. Well, the history on this one is actually kind of interesting. You might recognize this as the Topcoder staff shirts that we first started using about 3 years ago now, when we did that big giant event in San Francisco in the abandoned warehouse from The Walking Dead. I mean the pier that we dressed up all nicely. So we actually had a bunch of these shirts, which I had two from that event. However, in preparation for the most recent TCO, I actually made a day out of it on a Saturday with Jesse. And Jesse, my wife and I and my sister-in-law actually went down and we cleaned out our storage unit, trying to thin out all the stuff we didn't need so that we didn't have to ship quite as much stuff for TCO anymore. And in fact, there were a whole bunch of these shirts left. So I literally have a whole box of these at home.
Oh my God.
I think I have approximately 20 of this shirt, which is great, in the Steve Jobs sense of the word, of not having to figure out what you're going to wear any given day.
Right.
So yeah,
right.
it's perfect. I figured what better occasion than talking about Topcoder, right?
I like to point out that I'm wearing my TCO 14 shirt. Was that the one that was in the warehouse? Oh no, that was in Indianapolis. Oh, I forget. I don't know.
14 might have been the warehouse. Yeah, it is hard to remember. I've been to a lot of TCOs at this point, so.
Absolutely. All right. Well, again, thank you for joining me. I know that a lot of people are tuning in, very excited to hear more about the algorithm track. So I guess, just generally, could you kind of just tell us about the algorithm competition, what it involves?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Most folks who participate a lot will probably already know this, but for the uninitiated, algorithm competition means it's problem solving. And it's not just writing code to do something, but how you write the code to solve the problem efficiently enough and correctly. You're given kind of a set of inputs. You're told what you're supposed to calculate, what you're supposed to come up with. And generally speaking, for any given set of inputs, there's exactly one right answer you should come up with. There's a few problems that differ from that a little bit, but most of the time that's the case. In addition to just coming up with the right answer, however, your code has to fit within certain memory and runtime limits. So it has to run fast enough and efficiently enough to actually solve the problem. Each competition, you're going to have typically 3 problems: easy, medium, hard. Although when we start looking at things like TCO and you start to get to the later rounds, it's kind of harder, and hardest. The idea being you score points based upon how quickly you're able to solve the problem, but you only get to keep your points if, in fact, your solution passes the tests. So if you submit something very quickly that's wrong, you'll ultimately still get no points for it, which is kind of what makes it interesting and adds some of the suspense. You don't know until the very end for sure that your stuff was actually good.
Okay, so like when they submit, they do run it against certain tests, like 10 or 15 tests?
Yep. So what we have is each problem is provided with what we call example test cases. These are maybe 3, 4, 5 kind of examples showing what kind of input you'll get and what your output should be. And usually for at least 1 or 2 of them, there'll be some annotation just explaining how that solution works, usually for 1 or 2 simple test cases, just to give you an idea and make sure you understand kind of the inner workings of what you're supposed to be putting together. So a competitor usually will, and in fact definitely should, at least run their code against the provided example cases to make sure that it passes at least those, because obviously if it doesn't, it's going to fail anyway. That said, the example cases are usually written in such a way as to not necessarily give away all of the possible peculiarities of a problem. It's just an idea to make sure that you understand how the problem works. There may be interesting gotchas hidden for certain kinds of examples that we don't provide. So it is up to the competitor to think, if they've fully covered all possible cases.
Okay, awesome. So we're talking about algorithm. So there's this thing called single round match, right?
Yes.
Can you
Yeah,
explain what that is?
that's what our typical algorithm competitions are. We run
Okay.
several of them a month, typically two a month now, sometimes more than that if there's a reason to. And it's a competition where from start till finish, it's less than 2 hours in length. You spend 75 minutes, an hour and 15 minutes, actually opening up the problems and writing your code. Get a 5-minute break. Spend 15 minutes looking at other folks' code, attempting to find things that are wrong with it and trying to break their code in what we call challenge phase. And then the final testing at the end to confirm that your code is actually good. The nice thing about it is where I say the whole thing is over in less than 2 hours, it's a very small time commitment. It's also a lot of fun. You get your results right away, and it's basically completely automated. There's no manual reviewer that has to look at what you've submitted and evaluate anything. It all happens in our system, and you know pretty quickly how you did. You get to see how other people did. Typically, several hundred, sometimes over 1,000 people will compete at once. So it is a very interesting way to just kind of very quickly not just have a little fun with programming, but also sort of evaluate your own skills and see how you stack up against other people.
Now, how does that actually work, though? Being able to, are you injecting code to break other people's code, or are you putting like inputs in to break it? Like, how does that
Yeah,
actually
so
work?
so the challenge phase, what you actually do is you provide a set of inputs to somebody's code. Each problem has kind of a defined set of constraints, saying that here's what the inputs are going to be, here's the possible length of the data, here's what the data can contain. If you can come up with something that fits those requirements that you think is going to make somebody's code either give the wrong answer, run too long, break by throwing an error, or otherwise just simply not work, you can try challenging with that set of inputs. And if in fact your challenge is successful, you get extra points. However, if
Oh,
your
wow.
challenge is unsuccessful, you lose points. So you don't want to be just willy-nilly throwing challenges unless you really, really feel confident that there's something something there.
Exactly. Okay, awesome. No, that sounds like a lot of fun. And that kind of brings me to you were talking about times. I was kind of interested in that.
Yeah,
Are these SRMs at certain times of the day? Like,
good
when would an
question.
algorithm? Yeah, if someone wants to participate, first, where do they go to find out when the next SRM is, or when the next upcoming one is,
Yep.
and then why those times?
Okay. So generally speaking, we have all of our SRMs posted on our Topcoder public calendar, and we try to keep them posted at least a month or two ahead of time. Sometimes we're better or worse at this than other times, depending on what's going on. Um, but we try to at least have some advance notice on that as much as we can. There are usually a couple of different time slots we'll use, and that's actually kind of an interesting discussion all of itself. Right now, there's 3 primary time slots that we'll use for SRMs. It's either going to be, looking at Eastern time, which is where I'm located and where Topcoder originally was founded, has kind of been the bedrock for our timing for everything. There will either be 7 o'clock in the morning um, on a weekday, 9 o'clock at night on a weekday, or 12 noon on a Saturday. Very occasionally, we'll deviate that for a little bit, but usually those are the times when you're going to find contests being run. What that sort of allows us to do then is have time slots rather, that work for a variety of different time zones. As you imagine, we've got members all around the world, and there's hopefully some from all around the world even watching us right now. But you suppose that somebody, say, in Eastern Europe or in India or in Japan, might have a very different idea of what's a convenient time to do this than somebody in, say, Washington, D.C. might think is a good time to do this. That's why we try to have those different time slots to accommodate for different folks and allow everyone, hopefully, the chance to participate at least some of the time.
Right. And is there any difference, or can you tell us if there's any different experience for the live events, like the Topcoder regionals, Topcoder Open regionals that we do, like in Japan or
Yeah, that's
in
actually a great
China?
question. I haven't attended any recently, obviously, but
Hmm.
let's see, what was it, 2015, I was at most of them. And in fact, I can say it's a very different environment, and the experience actually differed depending on which event it was. Uh, in the San Francisco event that year, it was held at a company that sponsors us just about every year. MemSQL actually used their office, and more than anything, people had fun just kind of hanging out before the contest even started. We ran into some unfortunate issues with Wi-Fi there, which kind of delayed things a bit. But really, everybody was still having a good time, and it was just a whole bunch of coders with their laptops parked around tables wherever they could find room, competing, and actually being in the presence of other people who are also competing really sort of added something to the experience, I think, for a lot of folks. In Japan was a different experience still, where again everybody really enjoyed being together, but it was after the contest ended. Everybody just kept talking about the problems, talking about what they were doing for work. We got to a point
awesome.
where our permission to be in the space we were at had run out, and we had to start shuffling people out. However, before everybody left, as is consistent with Japanese culture, they all worked together to rearrange the chairs, sweep up the floors, and clean up all the garbage, and made this office space look pristine when they left. It was amazing. Probably one of the easier events to run from my perspective. And then India, we had space at a university, which was, I think, the largest attended of the regional events. Not surprising since we have so many members in India, but really everybody just enjoyed being there. But even the staff we had there was just so excited for the event. Many of them stayed up all night the night before to prepare the event space. So I think as a company, we kind of learned a lot of things about this, but members each brought to their different regional events kind of the things that they like to see. And really, it's just the experience of having that sort of on-site competition. Hitherto doing the regionals, the only really on-site competition we ever had was the Topcoder Open Finals, which is great if you're one of the fairly small subset of people who can get that far. But for the overwhelming majority of our members, even at best they're going to see one of the webcasts of it, but other than that, they're really never going to get the chance to experience that. So the regionals do open up some of that. Gives the opportunity for the members to interact with one another. And in a lot of cases too, where there may be sponsorships or things like that involved, it gives companies or gives universities the opportunity to find local people who are interested in programming and tech, and really just all in all a good thing for the community, not just in Topcoder, but the technical community in general.
Right, like a great way to kind of network and see who's in that area that are interested. That's
Exactly.
interested in kind of like similar things as you.
Exactly.
That's great. And actually, just to get some of the community involved now, we do have a question from the crowd here. This comes from Gorbanovs, and he's asking, regarding the Java Arena, is it still official, or are we encouraged to move to the web one? Why am I getting certificate issues on Windows when launching the Java Arena? Are there future plans for the arena?
Okay, that's a fantastic question. I have to be careful how I answer this because I don't want to commit us to anything that I have absolutely no authority to make happen. The Java Arena, officially, the web arena is kind of where we're trying to move to. In reality, there's not a whole lot of work going on either one. Depending on the preference of the user, folks who are familiar with Topcoder and have been around for a while almost universally prefer the Java Arena. It's much more well-featured. It's very quick and snappy to use, ignoring the certificate errors and things like this. It really does work very well at what it does. Hasn't been updated in a while, but it still works well. It's kind of that, it's that old Toyota Corolla you've got sitting in your driveway that's got 250,000 miles. Yeah, you could replace it, but you know what? It works really well. It gets great gas mileage. So there's still some value there. The web arena, of course, kind of brings a new level of accessibility. Theoretically, it works better across a variety of devices and platforms. You don't have to install any special software to run it. It's just right there in your browser tab. But as just about anyone who has used the web arena, or really any big web application probably knows, there's a certain something that you lose in the responsiveness and in the interactivity of using a web-based app. As good as many of them are nowadays, and for as many good things as the web arena does, some of those trade-offs may not be worth it for everyone. So there is definitely some personal choice there. Specifically about the whole Java certificate thing, my apologies. We are aware of that issue. It's one of those kind of things where it's sort of a low priority because it's easy to work around it. But yeah, we are aware of that, and I apologize.
Just I guess for people that may be having trouble with that now, do you know what the workaround is? Is that something a little simple to explain, or maybe take it off into the forums?
Yeah, that's a little bit larger discussion. It's not hard to do. It's just a matter of simply choosing to ignore the certificate error, basically. And there's things in your Java control panel and stuff you can do to get around that. It's a
Okay.
little bit different platform by platform, but I don't remember the exact steps offhand because I did it such a long time ago and I've never thought about it again.
Not a
I
problem.
seem
Not a
to remember
problem.
a very simple thing though.
All right, we'll take it to the forum. If you have trouble with that, definitely let us know, or just submit a ticket to support. We'll be happy to help you out there. So jumping back to the SRMs.
Sure.
So what if someone missed the SRM but they wanted to participate? Like you said, it was at 7 a.m. but at that time,
Sure.
someone wasn't awake. Is there still a way to like work on that problem, like just to see if I would have done
Yeah.
well?
Yeah, and that's definitely a very common thing. So right at the end of each competition, unless something goes wrong and we have to fix something, within a few minutes, we'll have a practice room available, which essentially is a clone of all the problems that you can open with the point values, and you're then free to go and try to solve those problems yourself. You don't have the advantage of being timed or challenging other folks in the same way that you do in a live competition, but you can absolutely go and try to solve those problems, see how long it takes you to do it. You'll get a score the same way you would as though you were participating in the live competition. And you can even run the system tests to confirm that your code is good. You do have the ability to challenge in practice rooms even too. However, it's not limited to the 15-minute phase the same way as it is in the real competition. But you still can get that sort of experience, and you can certainly play with the problems and do them. And in fact, many members, especially the higher performing members, will absolutely go back after each competition, even if they've missed it, and will solve the problems just to make sure that they understand how to do them and see what kind of interesting problems may have been presented.
Awesome. And do you write the problems? Or is
Uh,
it
I sometimes write problems, although not often anymore. We actually have a kind of a whole process behind that. We have what's called a problem writing coordinator who oversees the creation of problems for each contest. Some of you may know the member CGY Forever. Galyan's his name. He's currently our problem writing coordinator. Formerly, before him, it was Makoto, RNG58, who was doing it. So the problem writing coordinator is obviously a member who is very
I just want to
capable.
interject, reigning Topcoder champion too, RNG.
Yes, and I believe he's reigning champion, or at least close to champion in several other contests as well. But again, all very high performing folks. What they will actually do is they will work with any members that have signed up to become a problem writer to basically see who has some problems that they want to use for an upcoming contest. Typically, we try to have a single person write all the problems for a contest, at least for SRMs. For TCO rounds, that doesn't always work as well. But yeah, the idea being that he oversees a lot of that, makes sure we've got a good set of problems together, balances the point values appropriately. I used to write a lot more problems than I do now. Nowadays, I'll usually only do a few here and there, particularly for one-off work for clients and stuff like that.
Okay, great. And I actually had a personal question. What would you say is why would you want to participate on Topcoder? Like, I know like a lot of people participate on a lot of different platforms, but what makes Topcoder special?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think the big thing about Topcoder for a lot of folks now is nostalgia. The fact that we were, without a doubt, the first in this space to have kind of the interactive sort of competitions. Apart from that, though, the one thing that I think still sets Topcoder apart from every other platform out there, and this is not to knock any other problem platform, of course, but is the sense of polish and consistency to the problems. We actually have, for every problem that is written, there is at least one person testing it, usually two, and there's another person whose job is simply to do what we call language review, meaning that when you're talking about programming problems, you're talking about essentially mathematical language in a lot of cases. There's a certain parlance and there's a certain consistency of that language that's expected. A comma out of place or a word that could have uncertain meaning can sometimes cause issues. So we try very hard to avoid any of those kind of mistakes. And we try to make sure not only that, but that our usage of terminology is consistent across all of our contests. In the world of programming, you sometimes will see certain phrases that maybe don't come up in everyday life. One that comes to mind off the top of my head is sorted lexicographically. And you hear a word like that, you're like, okay, that's a big word. You might imagine the meme of Will Ferrell saying photosynthesis to sound smart. But what that actually means is it means sorting things in order by the first element, from smallest to largest, then by the second element, and so on. But that's a programming term that has a very specific meaning, and we want to be sure that terms like that are used properly and used consistently. So really, overall, just that sense of cleanliness and polish that goes into all of the problems we produce, I think is probably one of the big things that sets us apart.
Awesome. And like you said, we have members from all over the world, and they do this on other platforms as well. Like, what do you think makes like algorithms so popular worldwide? Like, is it?
Good question.
And a follow-up question to that is it difficult for some people who aren't fluent in English to understand the problems enough?
Oh, okay. I'll take those questions one at a time, because they're definitely common problems. I think the reason it's popular worldwide is kind of twofold. Number one, the small time commitment. It's very easy to do, and it's very fun. With algorithm stuff, outside of TCO, there's really no prizes involved. It's just about trying to see how well you can do. The only real reward is either finishing high in rankings in a contest, or through a system we have called the rating system, where at the end of each contest you are rated against all other members that compete in that contest, and you sort of have an ongoing rating value that is tied to your username in Topcoder. It's loosely based upon the ELO chess rating algorithm, but kind of expanded to work properly for more than two people participating at the same time. But the idea being, somebody with a very high rating is somebody who's very, very good, going to win a lot. Somebody with a lower rating, perhaps not as much. But what you can do is, as you practice and as you participate more, you see your ratings start to go up slightly, meaning that you're more consistently performing better than you were in the past. And that could be a nice little motivator, just bragging rights if nothing else, but also just personal motivation too. So that I think is a big part of why the algorithm competitions are so popular. The second question you asked was regarding non-native English speakers. That certainly can be a challenge for some folks. I think one thing that you will find, particularly within not just programming competitions, but also in math competitions and stuff like this at the international level, even at the pre-college level, English is oftentimes standardized as sort of the common language that's used for a lot of these things. It's not the only language used, but is by far the most common. So at least in terms of technical writing and problem definitions, most members, even that are not from English-speaking countries, are familiar enough with English in this context to kind of figure out their way through what's being asked in a problem. Of course, interestingly, at a lot of our on-site events, we do allow folks to bring a whatever language to English dictionary with them, and there are a few who do. I can think of one or two off the top of my head. But generally speaking, most folks that participate on the platform know at least enough English to kind of get their way through it.
Great. Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about that too, because math is pretty much a universal language as well, right? And most of this is math. Like that's
a lot of it that is defined in terms of equations and stuff like that, you can glean and figure out a lot of the meaning without even having to look at the English language part of it. Sometimes you've got to struggle a little bit to make sure you understand the prose that goes with it, but yeah, a lot of it just comes down to the math.
Awesome. And what technologies do I need to know to be able to, like, I'm a newbie, and do I need to know Java? Do I need to know like Python? What are the languages that we support on Topcoder to participate?
So the languages we support are C++, Java, Python, C# and VB.NET. That last one basically nobody uses anymore. So I would say it's C++, Java, Python, and C#. If you know at least one of those languages, you can compete. You can write code. You can solve the problems. Now, when you get to the second part of the competition where you're challenging, you obviously have something of a competitive advantage to know all of those languages and be able to look at somebody's code, try to figure out if there's something wrong with it. Obviously,
I didn't realize that. That's a great point. Yeah.
So it is definitely helpful to know all of those languages. That said, even if you don't know the language great, oftentimes you can sort of dummy your way through it and figure out what a program is saying, even if you're not a super expert in that language. Another point that comes up too, and this is definitely for a more advanced level of competing, but there are some cases where one language may be slightly easier or harder to solve a particular problem. Some languages have standard libraries that maybe offer a simpler way to just kick off a sort, or maybe one language might perform a little bit better than another. In general, for anybody who's wondering, C++ is going to be your fastest, followed by C#, followed by Java, and trailing very far behind Python.
Whoa,
Roughly,
hot
just
tip.
in terms of
Hot tip alert. That was it
yeah,
right there.
no, that's just kind of a reality of the languages. C++ compiles down to machine code, so it's going to run your fastest. C# is going to run some fraction of that speed because it is translated to a bytecode. Java is also translated to a bytecode. It's not quite as efficient as C# in most cases. And Python, as much as Python has advanced over the years, it is still an interpreted language, and in spite of some of the just-in-time interpretation and compilation that happens, it's still the slowest of the languages by a full order of magnitude. So for really computationally heavy problems, sometimes you will find folks definitely preferring C++. And in fact, most of our highest rated members compete almost exclusively in C++. There's a few exceptions that go to Java or C#, but most are C++.
Sweet. All right, we have a question from Jessie. She asks, what made you join Topcoder as a member way back when and stay on as an admin for so long?
That is a fantastic question. So I'm like the malignant cancer of Topcoder. You think I'm gone, but I'm still kind of around.
Oh, Tim.
No, I'm saying that to get Jesse's goat a little bit. So I actually joined back in 2004, maybe, something like that. I joined because I heard about both the Google Code Jam, which was being run on the Topcoder platform at that time, and the TCO, which both happened to be taking place at roughly the same time. A friend from days gone by had randomly emailed me and was like, hey, have you heard about this stuff? It looks like something you could do really well in. So I was like, okay, I'll try that. So I signed up, kind of got addicted to it, and competed as a member for many years. I wouldn't say I competed all the time, but I competed when I could. In the process of this, though, I learned that in addition to just competing, you could also write problems. Well, writing problems seemed like a lot of fun, a way to make a few bucks. And something I found once I started doing that is I was actually learning a lot more and learning a lot quicker by writing problems than I was by competing, because it was forcing me to think through things and solve things, think a little bit deeper about stuff. And I actually really found I enjoyed that a lot. Well, this progressed for quite some time, and eventually we introduced the marathon competitions. Goes outside the scope of what we're talking about today, but suffice to say, I started working on writing problems for those as well. There actually was a point in time where myself and one other individual were basically writing every marathon problem that we posted for over a year. So I would be talking in the forums a lot, answering questions and stuff, and it got to a point where I was speaking authoritatively on things all the time, was constantly, working behind the scenes to do things. I sort of approached some of the folks of Topcoder administration at that time and said, is there any chance of me coming on part-time just as an admin, so at least I look the part and can just do a lot of these simple fixes for myself that I need and stuff like that? And they said, well, yeah, given how some of our people are moving around and blah, 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 yeah, we think that'd be a good idea. Sounds good. So I started, I'm trying to think now, maybe 2008, essentially just a part-time admin, running a lot of stuff behind the scenes. I've been doing that ever since. There was a period of about 2 years or so where I actually was working full-time for Topcoder, which was a fantastic experience. For those that don't know, I'm once again, I actually have a day job outside of this, but I can never really leave Topcoder just because I enjoy it so much and I get so much out of it.
Awesome. So I just want to remind everyone that's with us live here, we are winding down on the interview. So if you do have a question, I suggest you get them in pretty soon. I do have a couple questions left for you.
Fantastic.
Do you have any tips for newbies? Like, I'm brand new to Topcoder. I'm watching this live. Maybe I'm not even signed up with Topcoder, but I do love data science. I love doing algorithms. What are some tips that you might have for someone like me?
Yeah, definitely. I would say, obviously, the biggest thing, get yourself signed up, because without a Topcoder handle, you won't be able to access any of this. The sign-up process has been made a lot more simple than it once was. It's something like 10 questions now, where it used to be a 3-page long litany of all sorts of stuff that people didn't really like. It's pretty easy now that you sign up, you've got your handle and your password, so you can log in. The best thing if you're going to compete in algorithm is actually go in the arena and go to some of the practice rooms, open the problems, get a feel for how the arena works, get a feel for what the structure of a solution is going to look like. You want it ingrained in your muscle memory. Write out public class whatever, public in whatever as your class name and your method. Just understanding how that's going to look will prevent you from stumbling through that when it's the real thing, when it's competition. And you get a sense too for, if you do a few practice problems, you kind of see how it works. You start to learn a little bit about the things to look out for. You start to see why you're always failing tests, and eventually you start to realize it's usually the same few mistakes, especially early on. You get past some of that, you enjoy the experience a lot more.
Awesome. That was great. That was a great answer. We do have a question from Luis, who asks, who is the top best algo member of all time according to you? Justify your answer, smiley face.
Oh, that's hard. See, ratings are both awesome and they're a funny thing. Mm-hmm. Because they represent how folks do competing against each other at any given time. But you might be tempted to look back in time at some members who haven't competed recently. I'm trying to think of a few names off the top of my head. Radeye comes to mind. Tomek doesn't really compete anymore except occasionally for TCO. All very strong folks. But many of them, especially if they have not competed at all lately, you wouldn't necessarily be able to judge their performance nowadays, because over time, the level of difficulty of our problems, particularly in Division 1 on the top end of the spectrum, has gone up dramatically. In part due to there being a lot of coding competitions, and in part due to there being a fair number of people who do this so much that they've gotten very good at it themselves. We've had to increase the difficulty to kind of keep up with that. So somebody who perhaps maybe competed in the early 2000s but hasn't anytime recently, they may be a very good programmer and may still be very good at this kind of stuff now, or they may have simply fallen behind and not be able to keep up. So I'm gonna have to go. I apologize. There's some recency bias for this. I would say that my it would either go to Makoto, obviously, or Gennady. It would probably be one of those two. Part of the reason I would say that too is that if you look at contests outside of Topcoder, they consistently perform very well. Really, just if they're not winning, they're in the top 3 or 4 every single time. There's obviously, this is no disrespect to any of the other members, there's a lot of other very highly rated folks who are very close behind that. Peotra and some of those folks too. Obviously all very, very strong competitors, but I would say it's got to be one of those two, probably.
Great. Well, thank you for that. I don't see any other questions left in the chat, so I think you might now be off the hook. Thanks for joining us. I do want to remind people that, yes, we are going to be, oh, I'm sorry. We might have one.
Oh, we have a question.
We do have a question. Yes. Okay, so this one's from Edwin. He says that he feels like it's tough to become a yellow or red member because he doesn't have the necessary theories. What books would you suggest, or perhaps websites that?
Okay, so really, I would suggest practicing Topcoder problems over and over and over repeatedly. I could give you the kind of what I would call the trite suggestions about, Donald Knuth, Art of Programming, or Steve Skiena has some books on programming contests. Those are all kind of the standard fare. But even reading some of the stuff that's posted on the Topcoder website, I would have to dig up the links. But we've got some stuff just talking about some of the various theories and all. Really, though, practicing problems a lot and seeing, and actually not just by practicing, I mean not just looking up the solution and coding it, but actually, wiping your slate clean and trying to write it yourself from scratch a few times over, just to understand how, how does a max flow actually work? What is a Floyd-Warshall algorithm look like? Some of these kind of things. What is bipartite matching? When you actually implement these things yourself and write through them, you get a sense for how they're used. Of course, there's obviously all the programming theory that you learn, say at the early college level, but it's the actual implementation of that and using those against real problems that is really going to make you learn it. And that's why I say practice problems, practice problems, practice problems over and over again. After every match, do all of the problems and practice them until you can actually solve all of them. When I first started, that was definitely my strategy for improving, is after every single contest, try to solve every single problem to make sure I knew how to do it.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah,
And
no problem.
yeah, I think, oh, Harshit has a random question. He says, any idea where Tomek is these days?
He works for SpaceX, last I heard.
Ooh, cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I don't think that's secret knowledge or anything. Yeah,
There you go.
Last I talked to him in person, he seemed pretty happy and seemed to be enjoying himself. So
Awesome. All right, well, I think that'll do it for us. I want to remind everyone, if you haven't seen our Facebook post for Algorithm Week, we are giving away a t-shirt. If you don't win one in this chat, there's another opportunity. So if you go to it, you comment your best post, your best tip for newbies, you could possibly win a t-shirt there as well in a random drawing. Tim,
how do I win a t-shirt, Nick?
I think you just talk to Jessie and she'll hook you up. But Tim, you're going to be responsible for picking out the winner for this t-shirt contest. So I need you to pick a number between 1 and 18.
Between 1 and 18. All right. Hang on 1 second here.
Yep. Like random.
Well, I mean, obviously, I'm going to use a fair process for this.
Okay. A little random number generation.
Yeah, I'm actually using the rand between function in a Google Sheet. 7 is the winner.
7 is the winner. All right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Amay Narkeed. Amay Narkeed. Are you here? This is the name. Hope if you're a Topcoder member, please send me your Topcoder handle, nick.castillo. I'll write it in here. Congratulations to you. Amay, if you send me an email with your Topcoder handle, we can verify you. We will get you a t-shirt. Harshit's on the line. He's our t-shirt guy, so he'll be sending that out to you. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining. Thank you, Tim, so much again. I'm sure everyone was just having a great time learning about algorithm.
I hope so.
Yeah, I think they're pumped. They're ready to go solve some problems. So
excellent. First TCO round is coming up on Saturday, so
now that's right.
Time to practice.
Awesome. Any last words? Is there any way to follow you if anyone wants to get in contact with you?
Anybody is certainly welcome to message me, tim@copilots.topcoder.com, if they ever like to. I can't promise I'll be able to get back right away, but I usually will try to. I do get actually a fair amount of people messaging me and asking me questions once they have my contact information, so we'll see how that goes. But yeah, I will make every reasonable effort to get back to folks when I can.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. All right, guys. We'll see you next time. Bye.